You know that specific kind of silence that follows a funeral? It is not peaceful. Everyone tells you it is going to be peaceful, that it is a time for closure, but they are lying. It is loud. It is deafening. It screams at you from the corners of the room where the dust motes are dancing in the afternoon sun, reminding you that the world is still spinning even though your own personal world has just ground to a violent, screeching halt. That was exactly where I was standing 3 days ago. I was standing in the center of my mother's living room, clutching a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee that tasted like burnt hazelnuts, watching my husband, Jason, charm the socks off my great-aunt Linda. I remember staring at him and feeling a shiver that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He looked perfect. He was wearing the charcoal suit I bought him for our anniversary last year, the one he complained was too tight across the shoulders, but today he wore it like a suit of armor. His hair was gelled back, respectful but stylish. He had this practiced, solemn nod he was giving to everyone who offered their condolences. He was playing the role of the grieving son-in-law so well that if I didn't know him better, I would have believed he was actually heartbroken. But I did know him better. And that was the problem. My dad had died suddenly. Massive heart attack. 1 minute he was mowing the lawn, complaining about the neighbor's crabgrass creeping under the fence, and the next minute he was gone. Just erased. The shock was still vibrating in my bones, making my teeth chatter even when I wasn't cold. But Jason wasn't vibrating. Jason was vibrating with something else entirely. Energy. Kinetic, buzzing energy. He was moving through the funeral reception like he was working a room at a sales conference. He was shaking hands, patting backs, and guiding people to the buffet table with this strange, helpful authority that made my stomach churn. I watched him lean in close to my mom, who was sitting on the sofa looking like a ghost in a black cardigan. He placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezed it gently, and whispered something. Mom nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue that was already shredded to bits. It looked like a tender moment. It looked like love. But then Jason turned away, and for a split second before he rearranged his face back into that mask of solemnity, I saw it. A smirk. A tiny, microscopic twitch of his lips that vanished as quickly as it appeared. I blinked, thinking maybe the grief was making me hallucinate. Maybe I was projecting my own anger onto him. Grief does weird things to your brain, right? It makes you suspicious. It makes you angry at the people who are still alive just for the crime of breathing when the person you love can't. I tried to talk myself down. I told myself that Jason was just trying to be strong for me. He was trying to handle the logistics so I didn't have to. That's what good husbands do. They step up when the wife is falling apart. But then he walked over to me. He slid his arm around my waist, pulling me into his side. His grip was firm. Too firm. It felt possessive, like he was staking a claim on a piece of property rather than comforting his wife. "You holding up okay, babe?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. "I don't know," I whispered, leaning my head against his shoulder because I was too tired to hold it up myself. "It doesn't feel real yet. I keep expecting him to walk through the front door and ask who ate the last donut." Jason chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "I know, babe. I know. He was a great man. A really successful man too. He built quite a legacy." That word stuck out to me. Legacy. It felt heavy. It felt loaded. Most people would say he was a kind man or a funny man or a stubborn man. But Jason went straight to successful. "Yeah," I said, pulling away slightly to look at him. "He was." "Don't worry about your mom," Jason said, scanning the room again, his eyes darting from the antique grandfather clock to the expensive oil painting above the mantel. "We're going to take care of her. We're going to take care of everything. We have a lot to sort out, but we'll get through it. The assets, the estate, the house. It's a lot of work, but I'm ready to step up." My blood ran cold. We hadn't even buried the flowers on the grave yet, and he was talking about assets. He was talking about the estate. I felt a sudden urge to push him away, to scream at him to stop counting my dead father's money in his head, but I didn't. I couldn't make a scene. Not here. Not now. So I just nodded, swallowed the bile rising in my throat, and took another sip of that terrible cold coffee. Hey guys, really quick before I tell you what he said next that actually made me physically sick. I am so curious to know where you are all listening from. I feel like we are building a little community here and it helps me feel less alone sharing this. So, pause the video for 1 second, scroll down and drop a comment with your city, country, and what time it is where you are right now. I'm going to be reading through them later tonight when I can't sleep. Okay, done. Let's get back to it. The reception dragged on for another 2 hours. Felt like 2 years. I was trapped in a loop of, I'm so sorry for your loss, and he's in a better place, nodding like a bobblehead doll until my neck hurt. Through it all, Jason was everywhere. He was talking to my dad's lawyer, Mr. Henderson, in the corner by the bookshelf. I saw them speaking in hushed tones. Mr. Henderson looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, clutching his briefcase like a shield. Jason, on the other hand, looked animated. He was using his hands to emphasize points, leaning in, dominating the space. I walked past them, pretending to head to the kitchen for more napkins, and I caught a snippet of their conversation. Standard procedure for the disbursement, right? I mean, since Chloe is the only child, the timeline should be pretty accelerated, Jason was saying. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses, looking over Jason's shoulder and spotting me. He cleared his throat loudly. Jason, this is hardly the time or the place. We will schedule a formal reading of the will next week. Let Chloe grieve. Jason stiffened. He turned around and saw me, and his face transformed instantly. The aggressive, hungry look vanished, replaced by that soft, concerned husband mask. Hey babe, he said, reaching out for my hand. Just asking Mr. Henderson some questions about the timeline. I don't want you or your mom worrying about paperwork during this difficult time. Just trying to take the load off. I don't care about the paperwork, Jason, I said, my voice trembling. I care about the fact that my dad is never going to call me again. I know, he soothed, guiding me away from the lawyer. I'm just thinking ahead. Practicality is my way of coping, you know that. We finally left around 7 in the evening. The drive home was excruciating. The rain had started to fall, a slow, miserable drizzle that streaked the windows of our sedan. Jason was driving. Usually he listens to sports radio or heavy metal, but today he drove in silence. But it wasn't a respectful silence. It was a thinking silence. You could practically hear the gears turning in his head. I stared out the window, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of orange light. I was thinking about the last time I saw my dad. We had argued about something stupid. I think it was about me not checking the oil in my car. He was always on me about car maintenance. Take care of your tools, Chloe, and they'll take care of you, he used to say. I would give anything to hear him lecture me about motor oil right now. You know, Jason said, breaking the silence so suddenly that I jumped. We should probably start looking at real estate listings. I turned to him, confused. What? Why? We have a house, Jason. We have a mortgage we're barely paying, but we have a house. Yeah, but that's a starter home, Jason said, gripping the steering wheel. His knuckles were white. With the inheritance coming in. I mean, let's be real, Chloe. Your dad was loaded. He didn't spend a dime on himself. That money has been sitting there compounding for 30 years. We're talking about a life-changing amount. We could pay off our debt, buy a place in the hills, maybe get that boat I've been talking about. I felt like I had been slapped. Okay, stop. Please. I can't talk about buying a boat right now. My dad is dead. I'm not saying we buy it tomorrow, he said defensively, glancing at me. I'm just saying we need to be prepared. We need to have a plan. We'll share the inheritance, right? That's what marriage is. Shared assets. Shared future. We're going to be set, Chloe. You need to stop thinking like a broke college student and start thinking like an heiress. An heiress. I repeated the word. Tasted like ash. Is that what I am to you now? A paycheck. Don't be dramatic, he snapped, his tone sharper than he intended. He took a breath and softened it. I'm just excited for us. For our future. Your dad would want us to be happy. He would want us to enjoy what he worked for. For a team, Chloe. 50-50. That money is going to solve all our problems. No more fighting about credit card bills. No more stress. Just us living the good life. He reached over and patted my knee, but I shrank away from his touch. He didn't notice. He was too busy smiling at the windshield, lost in a fantasy of luxury cars and vacations. When we got home, I went straight to the bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my black funeral dress, and stared at the wall. I replayed the day in my head. The smirk. The conversation with the lawyer. The timeline questions. And that phrase. We'll share the inheritance. He hadn't asked. He had declared it. He assumed it. He was already spending it. My dad had always been wary of Jason. He never said it outright. Dad was too polite for that. But I saw it in the way he watched Jason at family dinners. He always told me, Chloe, pay attention to how a man treats the waiter and how he treats his money. Those two things tell you everything. Jason treated waiters like servants and he treated money like it was water to be wasted. Dad knew. I pulled my knees to my chest. Outside the bedroom door I could hear Jason on the phone. He was pacing in the hallway. I strained my ears to listen. Yeah, Mike, I'm telling you, Jason was saying, his voice muffled but audible. It's happening. The old man finally kicked the bucket. Yeah. Oh, not yet, but soon. I'm thinking the Porsche. The vintage one. Yeah, we'll share the account, obviously, but I'll handle the investments. It's going to be sweet. Tears finally spilled over, hot and angry. He wasn't grieving. He was celebrating. He was celebrating my father's death because it meant he could buy a Porsche. I realized then that the man on the other side of that door wasn't my partner. He was a vulture. He was circling, waiting to pick the bones clean. But there was something he didn't know. Something nobody knew except me and my mom. Jason thought he had the winning hand. He thought he was walking into a bank vault with the door wide open. But as I sat there in the dark, listening to him brag to his friend about the investments he was going to make with my father's blood money, I remembered the conversation I had with my mom just before we left the reception. She had pressed something into my hand, a small, heavy key, and whispered 4 words that I hadn't understood until this exact moment. Watch him. Then wait. I wiped my face. The sadness was still there, a crushing weight, but something else was growing alongside it. A cold, hard resolve. Jason wanted to share the inheritance. He wanted a 50-50 split of a life he didn't help build. He thought the game was over and he had won. He had no idea the game hadn't even started. The morning after the funeral, the sun had the audacity to shine. It was one of those bright, aggressive mornings where the light pokes through every crack in the blinds, demanding that you wake up and participate in a world you no longer want to be part of. I rolled over, my eyes swollen and crusty from crying, and for a microsecond I forgot. I forgot that the world had changed. I reached for my phone to text my dad our usual "good morning, old man" text, a silly tradition we'd kept up since I went to college. Then the realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. There was no one to text. The number was just a digital ghost now. I dragged myself out of bed, the floorboards cold under my feet. From the kitchen I could smell bacon. Not just bacon, coffee, toast, the whole spread. It smelled like a Sunday brunch. It smelled happy. Made me furious. I walked into the kitchen, wrapping my robe tighter around myself like a shield. Jason was standing at the stove, humming. Actually humming. He flipped a pancake with a flourish that belonged in a cooking show, not in a house of mourning. "Morning, sleeping beauty," he chirped, not turning around. "Thought I'd make us a hearty breakfast. We need the fuel. Big day ahead." "Big day," I croaked. My voice sounded like I'd swallowed a handful of gravel. "Jason, we just buried my father yesterday. Today isn't a big day. Today is a day to sit on the couch and stare at the wall." He turned then, sliding a plate of perfectly stacked pancakes onto the island counter. "I know, babe. I know. But grief takes energy, right? And besides, I took the liberty of calling the bank. Just to get the ball rolling on the joint accounts. We don't want anything freezing up on us." I stared at the pancakes. He had even put a little pat of butter on top. It was grotesque. It was performative. It reminded me so much of the times he tried to impress my dad and failed miserably. To understand why this moment made my skin crawl, you have to understand who my dad was. Frank. That was his name. Just Frank. He wasn't a finance guy. He wasn't an investor. He was a man who started a plumbing and HVAC business out of the back of a rusted-out Chevy van in the 80s. He built his empire one leaky pipe and busted furnace at a time. He came home every single day smelling like copper, PVC glue, and honest sweat. Even when the business exploded, when he had a fleet of 50 trucks and contracts with the biggest developers in the state, he never changed. He still wore flannel shirts from Costco. He still drove a truck, albeit a newer one, but never a luxury car. He always said, "Chloe, a car is a tool to get you from A to B. If you need a hood ornament to tell people who you are, then you don't know who you are." He was the kind of man who checked the price of milk. He was the kind of man who knew the name of every single employee, from the managers to the newest apprentice. He respected grit. He respected the grind. And then there was Jason. Jason was shiny. That's the best way I can describe him. He worked in consulting, a job title that my dad never quite understood, and frankly neither did I. Jason loved brands. He loved labels. He loved the appearance of success more than the work required to achieve it. When I first introduced them, I thought they would get along. I thought Dad would appreciate Jason's ambition. I was so naive. I remember the first time I brought Jason home for dinner. It was about 3 years ago. We sat at the big oak dining table, the one Dad built himself, and Jason spent the entire meal talking about cryptocurrency and leveraging assets. Dad just sat there, chewing his pot roast slowly, his eyes unreadable. "So Frank," Jason had said, leaning back in his chair with a confidence he hadn't earned. "You've got a lot of capital tied up in equipment and overhead. Have you ever thought about liquidating some of the fleet and putting that liquidity into high-yield tech futures? I could introduce you to some guys." The silence that followed was heavy. My mom looked down at her peas. I kicked Jason under the table, but he ignored me, smiling that salesman's smile. Dad wiped his mouth with a napkin. He looked at Jason's soft, manicured hands, then at his own hands, calloused, scarred, with a permanently bruised thumbnail from a wrench slip. "Son," Dad said, his voice low and gravelly, "I don't gamble with money I sweat for. And I don't listen to advice from men who have never had dirt under their fingernails." It was brutal. It was classic Frank. Jason laughed it off, acting like it was a joke, but I saw the flash of anger in his eyes. He hated that Dad saw through him. He hated that he couldn't charm this old-school blue-collar millionaire. From that day on, it was a Cold War. Dad was never rude, he was too much of a gentleman for that. But he was distant. He watched Jason like a hawk. He noticed things I tried to ignore. One afternoon about 6 months ago, I was helping Dad clean out the garage. Jason was inside watching football, drinking Dad's beer. "He doesn't ask you questions, Chloe," Dad said suddenly, organizing his socket wrenches. "What do you mean?" I asked, grabbing a rag to wipe down the workbench. "He talks at you. He talks about what he wants, what he plans, what he thinks. But he never asks you what you want. He never asks about your day unless he wants something." Dad paused, looking at me with eyes that were so full of love and worry it made my heart ache. A man who doesn't ask questions is a man who doesn't care about the answers. He only cares about the sound of his own voice. "He loves me, Dad," I defended, though a small part of me knew he was right. "He's just driven." Dad sighed, tossing a wrench into the toolbox with a clang. "There's a difference between being driven and being hungry, Chloe. A driven man builds a house. A hungry man eats everything inside it." That memory played in my head on a loop as I stood in the kitchen, looking at Jason and his pancakes. A hungry man eats everything inside it. "I'm not hungry," I said, pushing the plate away. Jason's smile faltered just for a second. "You have to eat, Chloe. We have the meeting with Mr. Henderson next week, but I was thinking we could go over to your mom's today. Just to, help her organize the paperwork. He's probably overwhelmed. I bet she doesn't even know where the safe combination is." There was the hunger. He wasn't offering to mow her lawn or bring her a casserole. He wanted access to the safe. "My mother is capable," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee just to have something to do with my hands. "She handled the books for the business for 20 years. She knows where the money is, Jason." Sure, he said, leaning against the counter and crossing his arms. "But does she know how to manage it now that Frank is gone? Tax laws change. Estate taxes are a nightmare. I just don't want her making any mistakes that could hurt the estate. Hurt the estate. Not hurt her. Hurt the money. Why are you so obsessed with this?" I snapped, my patience finally snapping like a dry twig. "My dad isn't even cold yet and you're acting like an auditor." Jason's face darkened. He put down his spatula and walked over to me. He put his hands on my shoulders and again it felt heavy. Trapping. "I am obsessed with our future, Chloe," he said, his voice dropping to that manipulative whisper. "Your dad didn't approve of me. I know that. You know that. He thought I wasn't good enough for you because I didn't lay bricks or fix toilets. But I can prove him wrong. I can take what he built and turn it into something massive. I can make us kings. Don't you want that? Don't you want to show everyone that we made it?" "I was happy before," I whispered. "I didn't need to be a king." "That's because you've never had the option," he countered. "Look, I'm just saying we need to be smart. When we get that inheritance and it's going to be a test. A test of whether we can handle real wealth. I want to pass that test." He kissed my forehead, but his lips felt cold. "I'm going to shower. Then we're going to your mom's. Just to check in." He walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the smell of bacon and a pit in my stomach. I looked out the window at the backyard. I remembered the last time Dad was here. He had stood in that exact spot, looking at the fence Jason had promised to fix 3 months ago but never got around to. Dad had turned to me then, his face serious. "Chloe, watch out for the guy who promises you the moon but won't fix the fence. The moon is free. The fence costs work." I realized then that my dad had been leaving me breadcrumbs. Little warnings scattered throughout the last 3 years, hoping I would pick them up before it was too late. He knew. He knew that Jason was a hollow shell painted gold. He knew that if anything ever happened to him, Jason would stop pretending. And he was right. The mask had fallen off the second the heart monitor flatlined. I took a sip of coffee, but it tasted bitter. I knew I couldn't stop Jason from going to my mom's house. He was my husband. He had a legal right to be there, technically. But as I stood there, I made a promise to the ghost of Frank. I wouldn't let Jason bully my mother. I wouldn't let him touch a single dime of the money my father broke his back to earn. But I was scared. I was scared because I didn't know what Jason was capable of when he didn't get what he wanted. I had seen him angry at traffic or at a waiter who got his order wrong. But I had never seen him denied something he felt he was entitled to. I went upstairs to get dressed. I put on jeans and a black sweater. Practical clothes. Battle clothes. As I brushed my hair, I looked at the photo of me and Jason on the vanity. We looked so happy. It was taken in Hawaii on our honeymoon. I looked at his eyes in the photo. They were smiling. But now, looking closer, I wondered if they were just reflecting the sunlight. We got into the car an hour later. Jason was whistling again. He tapped the steering wheel in time to the music. "You know," he said as we pulled out of the driveway, "I was looking at the market caps this morning. If we liquidate the plumbing fleet, we could probably get a 4% return just on the inventory. It's a no-brainer." I didn't answer. I just stared out the window, clutching my purse. Inside my purse, tucked into a hidden pocket, was the key my mom had given me. I didn't know what it opened yet, but I had a feeling that whatever was behind that lock was going to be the only thing standing between us and total disaster. We pulled up to my parents' house, my mom's house now, and it looked smaller somehow. Without Dad's truck in the driveway, it looked vulnerable. Like a fortress with the gate left open. Jason put the car in park and turned to me. "Hey. Game face. Let's go help Mom." "Help Mom?" The lie hung in the air between us. "Yeah," I said, opening the door. "Let's go." As we walked up the path, I felt a strange sensation. It felt like the wind was pushing me back, warning me not to go in. Or maybe it was Dad's spirit standing in the doorway, arms crossed, blocking the entrance to the man he never trusted. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled like Dad, sawdust and Old Spice. It made me want to cry again. But I held it in. "Hello." I called out. "In the study, honey," Mom's voice came back. It sounded weak. Jason's eyes lit up. The study. That was where the safe was. That was where the business ledgers were kept. He didn't even wait for me. He strode down the hallway, his footsteps loud on the hardwood floor. He was practically running. I followed him, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew this was the beginning of the end. I just didn't know how ugly it was going to get. Walking into my father's study felt like walking into a shrine. The room was exactly as he had left it. His reading glasses were perched on a stack of invoices, and his favorite mug, the one that said "World's Okayest Golfer," was still sitting on a coaster, a ring of dried coffee at the bottom. It smelled like paper and tobacco, a scent that usually made me feel safe. But today, with Jason standing next to me, the room felt small. It felt exposed. My mom was sitting behind the massive mahogany desk, looking like a child in a giant's chair. She was staring at a pile of manila folders, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to sort through them. "Hey, Mom," I said softly, stepping around a stack of blueprints on the floor. "We just wanted to see if you needed anything. Food? Company?" Before she could answer, Jason breezed past me. He didn't look at Mom. He looked at the room. His eyes scanned the shelves lined with binders, the filing cabinets, the safe in the corner. It was predatory. "Helen," Jason said, his voice dropping into that professional consulting guy register. "You shouldn't be doing this alone. This is high-level administrative work. You need to focus on healing. Let me take this off your plate." He walked around the desk and actually placed his hand on the back of Dad's chair. My breath hitched. That was Dad's chair. Nobody sat there. Not even me. Mom looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and watery. Oh, Jason. That's kind of you. But Frank always had a specific system. I just need to find the life insurance policy for the funeral home director. I can find it, Jason insisted, reaching for the stack of folders under Mom's hands. I'm great at forensic accounting. I can organize all of this. We need to get a clear picture of the liquid assets versus the fixed assets before the lawyer meeting anyway. Jason, I warned, stepping forward. Back off. She knows the system. I'm just helping, Chloe, he said, flashing a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Efficiency is key right now. We don't want the estate to bleed value because of emotional delays. Emotional delays. That's what he called my mother's grief. Mom gently pulled the folders back toward her. I'm fine, Jason. Thank you. Why don't you two go home? I just need to be alone with him for a while. She gestured vaguely to the room as if Dad were standing there in the shadows. Jason looked annoyed. Visibly annoyed. He opened his mouth to argue, to push for access to those files, but I grabbed his arm and practically dragged him out of the room. We're leaving, I hissed. The next 48 hours were a blur of surreal, nightmarish behavior. Jason was hiding his greed before, he stopped bothering now. He was like a kid on Christmas Eve who knows where the presents are hidden and can't stop shaking the boxes. He stopped going to work. He called in bereavement leave, which would have been touching if he had actually spent the time grieving. Instead, he spent the time shopping. I came home from the grocery store on Tuesday to find a sleek, black van parked in our driveway. A man in a jumpsuit was carrying swatches of fabric into our living room. What is going on? I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. Jason was standing in the center of the room holding a glass of scotch. It was 2 p.m. Taylor, Jason said, gesturing to the man. I'm getting a custom suit made for the reading of the will on Friday. And for the meetings after. You know, with the wealth management guys. I need to look the part, Chloe. Dress for the job you want, not the job you have. A custom suit? I stared at him. Jason, we are maxed out on the visa. We can barely afford the funeral flowers. Relax, he laughed, waving his hand dismissively. I put it on the Amex. It doesn't matter. By next week we can pay off the Amex, the visa, and the mortgage with one check. You need to stop thinking poor babe. It's unbecoming. He turned back to the tailor. I want the Italian silk lining. The red one. It screams power, don't you think? I walked out. I couldn't watch it. I went to the backyard and sat on the fluctuating wooden steps, crying until my throat burned. He was spending money we didn't have, banking on a grave that wasn't even settled. But the real kicker came on Wednesday, the day before the reading of the will. I was in the kitchen trying to force myself to eat a piece of toast, when I heard a car engine revving in the driveway. A loud, throaty roar that shook the window panes. I looked out the window and my jaw dropped. There, sitting in our cracked concrete driveway, was a brand new cherry red sports car. I don't even know cars that well, but I knew this one cost more than my college education. It looked like a spaceship. And leaning against it, wearing sunglasses and a grin that looked like it was carved out of marble, was Jason. I ran outside. What is this? Whose car is this? It's a loaner, Jason beamed, slapping the hood. From the dealership downtown. I went in there today, told them who your dad was, told them about the estate settling this week. The manager knows Frank's name. Everyone does. He let me take it for a 48-hour test drive. But let's be real, Chloe. I'm not giving it back. He walked over to me, grabbing my hands and spinning me around. We're going to buy it on Friday right after the meeting. Kish. Bam. Just like that. You told a stranger my dad died so you could borrow a car? I whispered, pulling away from him. I felt sick. Physically revolted. Jason, have you lost your mind? That's vulture behavior. It's leverage, he shouted, his face flushing. Why are you such a wet blanket? Your dad worked hard so we could enjoy this. Why do you want to be miserable? I'm trying to build us a life here. A life of luxury. You should be thanking me for having the vision to upgrade us. I don't want an upgrade. I screamed back. I want my dad. I want my husband to care that I'm hurting. I don't give a damn about Italian suits or red cars. Jason stopped spinning. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes. The mask was completely gone now. You'll care when you see the bank balance, he said flatly. You're emotional right now. You're not thinking straight. Leave the thinking to me. I'm the man of the house now, Chloe. Frank is gone. It's my turn to steer the ship. He turned around, got into the red car and revved the engine again, drowning out the sound of my sobbing. He backed out of the driveway and sped off, leaving me standing in a cloud of exhaust fumes. I went back inside and sat on the floor of the hallway. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mom. The lawyer is ready for us tomorrow. 10 a.m. Bring Jason. I stared at the screen. Bring Jason. I thought about the suit. Her. The way he had touched Dad's chair. The way he called my grief an emotional delay. He was so sure. He was absolutely 100% certain that tomorrow morning he was going to walk into that office and walk out a millionaire. He had already spent the money in his head. He had already crowned himself king. I texted my mom back. We'll be there. I stood up and wiped my face. The sadness was still there, heavy and suffocating, but the anger was sharpening it into a weapon. Jason thought he was steering the ship. He thought he was the captain now. But he didn't know that ships can sink. And he didn't know that my dad, the man who fixed leaks for a living, knew exactly how to plug a hole. Or how to create one. Tomorrow wasn't going to be the coronation Jason expected. It was going to be an execution. And as I looked at the tire marks he left on the driveway, I realized I couldn't wait to watch it happen. Thursday night felt less like the evening before a legal meeting and more like the quiet hours before a bomb detonation. The air in our house was so thick with tension you could practically taste the static electricity. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. Jason was in the living room, pacing. I could hear his footsteps, heavy, rhythmic, agitated, back and forth on the hardwood floor. Thump, thump, turn. Thump, thump, turn. He had been on the phone with his guys all afternoon. I caught snippets of the conversations: tax shelters, offshore liquidity, capital gains avoidance. It was a vocabulary of greed that sounded foreign and ugly in the home we were struggling to pay for. Around 9 p.m. the pacing stopped. He walked into the kitchen. He was holding a folder. Not a manila folder like my mom's, but a sleek leather-bound portfolio. He slammed it down on the table in front of me. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. "We need to sign these," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command. I looked at the leather folder, then up at him. His eyes were bloodshot, probably from staring at spreadsheets all day, and his jaw was set tight. "What is this, Jason?" "It's a power of attorney," he said, sliding a pen across the table toward me. "And a spousal asset consolidation agreement." I had my buddy Mark draw it up. He's a paralegal. I didn't pick up the pen. Why would I need to sign a power of attorney? I'm 26 years old, Jason. I'm not incapacitated. Because tomorrow is going to be chaotic, he snapped, his patience instantly evaporating. He pulled out a chair and straddled it, leaning into my personal space. "Look, Chloe, Mr. Henderson is an old-school lawyer. He's going to try to wrap everything in red tape. He's going to try to stagger the release of funds, put things in trusts, make it difficult. If you sign this, I can speak for you. I can override his delays. I can demand immediate liquidity. It presents a united front." "A united front?" I repeated, my voice quiet but steady. "Or you taking control?" "It's the same thing," he shouted, banging his fist on the table. The teacup rattled in its saucer. "Why do you always make me the bad guy? I'm trying to maximize our return here. Do you think wealth just happens? You have to seize it. Your dad knew that." "My dad," I said, feeling a spike of hot anger in my chest, "didn't need to bully his wife to build his business." Jason's face twisted. It was a look of pure condescension. "Your dad was a plumber, Chloe. Let's not pretend he was Warren Buffett. I'm trying to take us to a level he couldn't even dream of. But I can't do that if you're going to be a passive, weeping little girl about it. I need a partner. Are you my partner or not?" He pushed the pen closer to me. It rolled across the table and hit my hand. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "Not until we hear what the will actually says." Jason stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward with a crash. He loomed over me, his shadow stretching across the kitchen tiles. For the first time in our marriage, I felt a genuine flicker of fear. Not that he would hit me. Jason was too concerned with his image for physical violence. But that he would destroy me emotionally just to get what he wanted. "You are being incredibly selfish," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "I have debts, Chloe. We have debts. I leverage some things based on this payout. If we don't get access to that cash tomorrow, things are going to get very ugly very fast. I stared at him. You did what? You spent money you don't have? Again. It's an investment, he roared. But it requires capital. If you walk into that room tomorrow and let that old lawyer lock up the money in a trust fund for 10 years, you are ruining us. You are choosing a dead man over your living husband. He pulled out his phone. Call your mother. What? Call Helen. Right now. He shoved the phone in my face. Tell her to bring the full financial ledgers to the meeting. Not just the will. The bank logins, the routing numbers, the safe deposit box keys. Tell her we are taking over the administration of the estate effectively immediately. I am not doing that, I said, standing up to face him. She is grieving, Jason. She lost her husband of 40 years on Sunday. I am not going to harass her for passwords. Then you're weak, he spat. You're weak just like her. And if you don't wake up and realize that this is a business transaction, you're going to lose everything. He grabbed the leather folder off the table. Fine. Don't sign it. But when we get in there tomorrow, you keep your mouth shut. Let me do the talking. I'll handle Henderson. I'll handle your mother. You just sit there and look pretty and nod when I tell you to. He stormed out of the kitchen, leaving the overturned chair on the floor. A moment later, I heard the bedroom door slam and the lock click. I didn't sleep in the bedroom that night. I slept in the guest room, curled up under an old quilt, clutching the key my mom had given me. I didn't know what it opened, but holding it felt like holding onto my dad's hand. Jason's words echoed in my head. You just sit there and look pretty and nod when I tell you to. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a silent partner. He wanted a signature stamp. The next morning, the silence in the house was absolute. It was the day of the reading. Jason emerged from the bedroom wearing the custom suit. It was a dark navy, impeccable, with the red silk lining he had bragged about. He looked like $1,000,000. He looked like a shark in human skin. He had shaved, gelled his hair, and put on enough cologne to choke a horse. Ready? He asked, not even looking at me as he adjusted his cufflinks in the hallway mirror. He acted as if the fight the night before hadn't happened. Or rather, he acted as if he had already won it. Yes, I said, grabbing my purse. I was wearing a simple black dress. I didn't look like power. I looked like a daughter who missed her dad. We drove to the lawyer's office in the borrowed red sports car. Jason drove aggressively, weaving in and out of traffic, checking his watch every 2 minutes. Traffic is a nightmare, he muttered. We can't be late. First impressions matter. We need to walk in there owning the room. It's not a business pitch, Jason, I said softly, looking out the window at the gray sky. It's a reading of a last will and testament. Everything is a business pitch, Chloe, he corrected me, glancing at his reflection in the rearview mirror. Life is a negotiation. And today we're closing the deal of the century. We pulled up to the law firm, a stately brick building downtown. Mr. Henderson's office. Jason parked the car across 2 spaces, killed the engine, and turned to me. He reached over and grabbed my hand. His grip was tight, painful. Listen to me, he said, his eyes boring into mine. No matter what Henderson says, we push for the lump sum. If he suggests a trust, we decline. If he suggests an allowance, we decline. We want full control of the principal. Do you understand? I looked at him. I looked at the man I had married, the man who was currently mentally calculating how fast he could spend my father's life's work. I understand exactly what you want, Jason, I said. Good, he smiled, releasing my hand and patting my cheek. Let's go get our money. He got out of the car, buttoning his jacket. I followed him, my hand brushing against the hidden pocket in my purse where the key sat. He thought we were walking in there to get our money. He thought he was the smartest person in the room. But as we walked toward the heavy oak doors of the law firm, I remembered my dad's voice one last time. The loudest guy in the room is usually the one with the most to hide. Jason was definitely the loudest. But he was about to find out that silence, my dad's silence, my mom's silence, and my silence, was a lot more dangerous. Mr. Henderson's conference room was designed to make you feel small. The table was a slab of polished oak the size of a landing strip, and the walls were lined with leather-bound books that looked like they hadn't been opened since the Reagan administration. The air conditioning was set to morgue, which felt appropriate given the occasion. My mom was already seated when we walked in. She was sitting on the far side of the table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked fragile. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the fluorescent lights, and she was wearing the same black cardigan she'd worn to the funeral. She didn't look up when we entered. She was staring at a spot on the table, lost in thought. Jason, on the other hand, practically moonwalked into the room. The red silk lining of his suit flashed as he unbuttoned his jacket. He scanned the seating arrangement, ignored the chair set out for him next to me, and walked straight to the head of the table, the seat directly opposite Mr. Henderson. The seat of authority. "Afternoon, everyone," Jason announced, his voice booming off the mahogany walls. He pulled out the chair and sat down, placing his leather portfolio on the table with a heavy thud. "Let's get this show on the road. I've got a hard stop at 2. He didn't have a hard stop. He was unemployed as of Tuesday, and his only appointment was with a bottle of champagne he planned to pop later. Mr. Henderson, a man who looked like a tortoise with a law degree, peered over his spectacles. He didn't speak immediately. He just let the silence stretch, heavy and awkward, until Jason shifted in his seat. "Mr. Smith," Henderson said slowly, his voice like dry leaves crumping. "That chair is reserved for the executor of the estate. That would be Mrs. Miller." He gestured to my mother. Jason's smile faltered, but only for a millisecond. "Right. Of course. Just getting comfortable. Helen, do you want to swap? Or are you good over there? You look comfortable." "I'm fine where I am, Jason," Mom said softly. Her voice was steady, which surprised me. "Great," Jason said, settling back in. "Let's proceed. Efficiency is the name of the game." Mr. Henderson sighed, a long, weary sound that signaled he had dealt with 1,000 Jasons in his career and didn't like any of them. He opened a thick file folder. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Frank Miller. As per state law, we will begin with the verification of assets and the—" "Objection," Jason said. He actually said objection like he was in a TV courtroom drama. I closed my eyes, wishing the floor would open up and swallow me whole. "Jason, stop." "No, Chloe, this is important," he said, holding up a hand to silence me. He turned his shark-like gaze on the lawyer. "Mr. Henderson, with all due respect, we know what the assets are. We know about the business, the house, the accounts. We don't need a history lesson. What we need is the disbursement schedule. Specifically, we need to discuss the strategy for the lump sum transfer to avoid capital gains. I've drawn up a proposal." He reached for his portfolio, unzipping it with a zip sound that grated on my nerves. "Jason," I hissed, leaning forward. "Put that away. This isn't a negotiation." "It's always a negotiation, babe," he winked at me, then turned back to Henderson. "Look, Frank was a great guy, but he was old school. He probably had this money sitting in low-yield bonds. I'm proposing we consolidate the liquid assets into a joint trust managed by myself and Chloe, allowing us to leverage." "Excuse me," my mother's voice cut through the air. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Like glass breaking. We all turned to look at her. She hadn't moved. Her hands were still folded. But her eyes were locked on Jason, and for the first time, I saw something burning behind them. It wasn't grief. It was fury. "You are proposing to manage Frank's money?" Mom asked. "Well, our money, Helen," Jason corrected with a condescending smile. "I'm just trying to help. I know you're not good with numbers. Frank always said you preferred gardening to accounting." "That was a lie. Frank never said that. My mom did the payroll for 30 years. He was a wizard with Excel." Jason was digging his own grave, shovelful by shovelful. "I know enough about numbers," Mom said, her voice dropping an octave. "I know that $700 is missing from the emergency jar in my kitchen. I know that a credit check was run on my social security number yesterday from an IP address registered to your phone, Jason." The room went deathly silent. The air conditioning hummed. I stared at Jason. His face went from confident to pale in a heartbeat. That was a mistake," Jason stammered, his confident facade cracking. "I was just testing the security of your accounts. Protecting you. Identity theft is a huge issue for seniors." "I am 60 years old, Jason, not senile," Mom said. She reached into her large tote bag. Jason's eyes followed her hand, greedy and terrified at the same time. He expected her to pull out a checkbook. He expected her to capitulate. Instead, she pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax, an old-fashioned stamp that my dad used to use for special occasions. The stamp was an anchor. Stability. Mr. Henderson, Mom said, ignoring Jason completely. Before you read the will, Frank left instructions that this letter be given to Chloe. He wrote it the night before he died. He told me that if Jason ever used the word leverage in this office, I was to hand it to her immediately. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dad knew. He predicted this exact moment. Mom slid the envelope across the polished table. It spun slowly, coming to a stop right in front of me. Jason stared at the envelope like it was a bomb. What is that? A codicil? An amendment? If it wasn't notarized, it's not legal, Helen. You can't just spring surprise notes on us. It's a personal letter, Henderson said, leaning back in his chair with the first hint of a smile I'd seen all day. And the deceased has the right to last words. I reached out and touched the envelope. It felt heavy, textured. I recognized Dad's handwriting on the front. For Chloe. Eyes only. Open it, Jason commanded, his voice high and tight. He leaned over, trying to read through the paper. Does it mention the accounts? Does it give you the authorization codes? I picked up the envelope. My hands were shaking. I looked at Mom. She nodded, a tiny, sad smile playing on her lips. She knew what was inside. Back off, Jason, I said, my voice finding its strength. We are partners, he shouted, standing up. Whatever is in there is 50% mine. I ignored him. I jammed my thumb under the flap of the envelope and tore it open. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I pulled out a single sheet of legal pad paper, yellow-lined, covered in my dad's distinct blocky scrawl. Jason was practically vibrating, leaning over my shoulder, his breath hot on my neck. Read it. What does it say? How much? I unfolded the paper. I started to read. And as I read the first line, the world stopped. The tears that had been welling up instantly dried, replaced by a shock so profound it felt like electricity. Jason, unable to wait, grabbed the corner of the letter to tilt it toward himself. Let me see, he demanded. He read the first paragraph over my shoulder. I felt his body go rigid. I felt the arrogance evaporate, replaced by a cold, hard paralysis. No, Jason whispered. This isn't real. This is a joke. I looked up at him, clutching the letter that changed everything. It's not a joke, Jason, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of devastation and dark vindication. It's checkmate. I cleared my throat, my hands trembling just enough to rustle the paper. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, a low buzzing sound that felt like the soundtrack to a bomb defusal. Jason was frozen, his face a rictus of horror, his eyes darting back and forth across the yellow legal pad as if hoping the words would rearrange themselves into a check. Read it, Mom said. Her voice was steel. I took a breath and began to read my father's last words aloud. Chloe, my sweet girl. If you are reading this, it means two things have happened. I am gone. And two, Jason tried to take control of the estate before my body was even in the ground. I told your mother to only give you this letter if Jason used the words leverage, liquidate, or joint control within the first week of my passing. I'm betting he didn't even make it 3 days. I paused, looking up at Jason. He looked like he was going to vomit. I continued. I've known for a long time that Jason loves my money more than he loves you. But I didn't want to ruin your marriage without proof. So, 6 months ago I hired a private investigator. I know about the gambling debts, Jason. I know about the $80,000 you owe to bookies in Vegas. I know about the second mortgage you took out on your parents' house by forging their signatures. A gasp escaped my lips. I stared at my husband. You forged your parents' signatures? It's not what it looks like. Jason shrieked, his voice cracking. It was a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back with the inheritance. Frank didn't understand high finance. Sit down, Mr. Smith, Henderson barked. The tortoise had snapped. I looked back at the letter. I knew you were banking on my death to bail you out. You thought my plumbing empire would be your winning lottery ticket. But here is the reality. I sold the business 3 months ago. Jason's knees gave out. He literally collapsed into his chair. He sold it? I liquidated everything, the letter continued. The fleet, the contracts, the warehouses. I converted every single asset into a localized trust. This trust has one beneficiary, Chloe Miller. And it has a poison pill clause. If Chloe is married to Jason Smith, the trust pays out exactly $0.00 per year. The funds remain frozen. However, if Chloe produces a finalized divorce decree, the trust unlocks immediately. The room spun. My dad, from beyond the grave, had created a mechanism that protected me, but only if I freed myself. There is no we, Jason. I read the final lines, my voice gaining strength with every word. There is no share. You are a man who dug a hole, and I'll be damned if I let you use my daughter as a ladder to climb out of it. Chloe, the key your mother gave you opens safety deposit box 404 at First National. Inside, you will find the PI's full report on Jason's illegal financial activities. Use it how you see fit. I love you, kiddo. Don't let him fix the fence. Kick him out of the yard. I lowered the paper. The silence that followed was heavy, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was final. Jason stared at the table. His face was gray. The red silk lining of his suit suddenly looked like a costume. Chloe, he whispered, reaching across the table. He was crazy. He was a senile old man. We can fight this. We can sue the estate. We can. I laughed. It was a harsh, jagged sound. There is no we, Jason. Didn't you hear him? I did this for us. Jason screamed, slamming his hand on the table. I bought the car for us. I bought the suit for us. I have $200,000 in short-term loans due next week because I promised them I'd have the payout. If I don't pay them, I'm dead. Literally dead. Then I guess you better start selling that suit, I said, standing up. I looked at Mr. Henderson. Draw up the divorce papers. I want them filed today. With pleasure, Mr. Henderson smiled. You can't do this. Jason stood up, tears streaming down his face. Angry, selfish tears. You can't leave me with nothing. I'm your husband. You were never my husband, I said, looking him dead in the eye. You were just an investment that went bad. I grabbed my purse, took my mother's arm, and walked toward the door. Chloe. Jason yelled after me. How am I supposed to pay for the car? How am I supposed to live? I stopped at the door, turned around, and gave him one last look. I don't know, Jason, but I hear the plumbing industry is hiring. Maybe you should learn to get some dirt under your fingernails. We walked out of the office, leaving Jason screaming at a dead man's letter in an empty room. We didn't go straight home. Mom and I went to a diner, Dad's favorite place. We ordered pancakes and coffee, and for the first time in a week, I breathed. I really breathed. The aftermath was swift. I filed for divorce the next day. When I opened the safety deposit box with the key, the PI's report was worse than I imagined. Jason wasn't just in debt. He had embezzled money from his last job and was facing potential jail time. The high finance life he bragged about was a house of cards built on fraud. Without my dad's money to bail him out, Jason's world collapsed. The red sports car was repossessed within 48 hours. He had to move back in with his parents, who were none too pleased about the second mortgage he'd forged. Last I heard, he was working as a shift manager at a car rental place near the airport, wearing a polyester uniform that definitely wasn't custom-tailored. As for me, the divorce was finalized 3 months later. The day the decree was stamped, the trust unlocked. It was more money than I could ever spend. But I didn't buy a boat. I didn't buy a mansion in the hills. I paid off my mom's house. I started a scholarship fund for trade schools in my dad's name. And I fixed the fence in the backyard myself. Every time I look at that fence, I think of my dad. He knew. He always knew. He didn't just leave me an inheritance. He left me my freedom. And honestly, that was worth more than every penny in the bank. So, guys, that's the story of how my husband tried to spend my dead father's money and ended up paying the ultimate price. If you learned anything from this, let it be this. Watch how people treat you when you're grieving, and never, ever underestimate a plumber with a plan. If you like this story, please destroy that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a drama. And let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? I read every single one. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.